Welcome back, friends, to my Winx controversy series, Back from the Grave, where we discuss the drama, the media coverage, and the controversies that orbit around our beloved show. Whilst we're here, I'm rechristening the series to Winxplained so that we can increase the scope of topics that we cover. Today we're going to be analysing a part of the brand that is little understood beyond its presence on the Winx spin-off show World of Winx, the fairy couture art style. A style controversial and much discussed in the fandom, but what's forgotten about it is how it came about in the first place and its presence as a product line. So let's discuss in today's episode of Winxplained. On this channel, we often talk about how insane merchandising for the Winx Club was at its height. From school bags to bedsheets to cooking appliances, Winx had it all, often developing new concepts and images for the Winx girls to go on products completely independent from the show. One of the most controversial of these is Winx Fairy Couture, an art style much criticized in the fandom, though there is little understanding for its origins. Most simply regarded as a stylistic choice made to distinguish the Winx spin-off show World of Winx from the main series, when in fact it was originally developed as a fashion brand and product line, and that's what we'll be discussing today. A lot of this information is hard to come by in the fandom, and I will be relying heavily on Winx Club All's archival work over the years. Winx Club All is a very long-standing Winx blog and a great resource for Winxology, whose details will be linked below. The first images of Winx Fairy Couture began circulating in 2012 as Winx Magical Fashion Tour, heralding the arrival of a new Winx-branded clothing line with an urban, trendy feel. Also circulating around this time as Fairy Style or Sweet Fairy, it finally launched in 2013 as Winx Fairy Couture, showcasing a style and aesthetic sense that were painfully 2010s. At this early stage, the line featured only the marketing three, Flora, Bloom and Stella, who have always been the default Winx representatives on merchandise, making appearances all over accessories, clothing, home goods and stationery. The defining moment of the launch was a children's fashion show in the summer of 2013, showing the Fairy Couture Spring-Summer 2014 collection. Soon after, two limited edition dolls were released, Urban Fairy Bloom and Sweet Fairy Stella, with only 500 of each if my information is correct. These dolls have a confusing amount of branding on the boxes. The magic is in you, Fairy Couture, my fairy friend. Hard to say what they were going for. In January of 2014, Fairy Couture branded fragrances were launched with unique scents for each of the girls, as exhibited by this confusing graphic. Fairy Couture stood out for its extreme art style that distorted the already exaggerated Winx proportions to unrecognizability. But in truth, the product line and art style weren't doing anything out of the common way in the realm of cynical, muted post-recession trends. Fashion art in muted tones, black and white line art with splotches of other brighter colors, monochrome with a dash of red, all of this I associate more with stationery and home decor from 2011, 2012, and the revival of the British invasion trends. British invasion generally refers to the popularity of British pop, synth and rock acts in the USA in the 60s and the 80s, but also the impact of British pop culture in general on trends. In the early 2010s, there was once again a certain British aesthetic presence in several industries, reflected especially in home and office decor. This could manifest in the form of monochrome and red pictures of London, the London Underground logo, or the Keep Calm and Carry On slogan being on everything, or plastering the Union Jack on every conceivable piece of furniture. In keeping with this trend, the first few merchandising collections of Fairy Couture were sticking to the magical fashion tour concept with the Gold City, New York City, and London lines. We love Abbey Winx Road. In fact, in Winx Club's case, there may also be the residual influence of Maya Fox, a fellow Rainbow franchise set in London. At this early phase of the product line, it's fair to say that the girls look completely unrecognizable, hard to match to their show counterparts, and indistinguishable from one another. In my opinion, Fairy Couture as a brand was attempting to straddle two different markets. On the one hand, as a product, it was being promoted to Winx fans, but on the other hand, it was trying to reach an older audience who had grown out of Winx, or perhaps had never even engaged with it. Therefore, these three girls on the products, which at this early point was only three, weren't necessarily meant to represent exactly their Winx characters, and yet at the same time, they were capitalizing on brand recognition. This is sort of the opposite of the approach they took with Season 8 merch. Season 8 has such a different art style and a different colour strategy, comparable more with those princess or pony books from the 2000s, and yet they use the futuristic shiny pink Winx logo, which looks obtrusive. In my opinion, they should have redesigned the Winx logo for Season 8, or at least made it a softer pink, but they didn't because the logo is so recognisable and brought consistency to the brand. Personally, by this time I had grown up a bit, and as a younger teenager I was taking pains to separate myself from my childhood interests. And yet, I was drawn to Fairy Couture products for their fashion silhouettes, for their more adult colour palette, and specifically for their vague appearance that separated them from the main Winx brand. Adults would not be able to recognise these products as Winx products, and there was nothing more embarrassing to me at that age than a family member looking at my interests and going, "Oh sweetie, isn't that for kids?" Well, look at me now. So for me, the proof is in the pudding in terms of brand strategy for Fairy Couture. Why else would it be so difficult to separate Bloom from Stella, Stella from Flora? The target audience was evidently different since mainstream Winx merch continued to be made during this time. This, however, does not present as an excuse for the lack of visual diversity in the line, even if the girls are intentionally vague and distinguished from their show appearances, because a brand targeting young girls as a demographic should make representation a priority every time. By the end of 2014, more and more of the girls were appearing in the art style on merch, and whilst as far as the main line, the marketing trio did continue to reign in their indistinct off-brand looks, I think the initial intention of really separating Fairy Couture from the rest of the brand was slowly being retired. The evolving trends were reflected in the animal prints and brighter colours that appeared in the line, and by 2016, the Fairy Couture imagery was plastered across every conceivable product, from filing folders to scarves to soap to art books to chocolate. Fairy Couture had its own magazine, and the art style had become more visible in general across the Winx brand because World of Winx was about to launch. World of Winx is a Winx Club spin-off series that came about as a result of Netflix trying to increase children's programming on its platform. Based off of the popularity of Winx seasons already on its platform, Netflix bought 2 seasons of the spin-off concept from Rainbow in 2014 to become available to viewers 2 years later. This is worth pointing out because, as we've established, the art style had made its appearance already prior to this date. The show was centered around the main 6 girls set in an alternative timeline on Earth, and it explicitly targeted an audience older than the demographic of the main show to once again extend the reach and range of the property. Rainbow was strongly motivated to pursue deals with digital platforms like Netflix to increase its presence in Anglophone markets. It was necessary in the creation of this show to have visual separation between it and the main show airing on Nickelodeon, hence the use of the Fairy Couture art style. The show had surprisingly good response from critics who appreciated what they perceived to be a return to form for the franchise, with interesting and deeper plots, mysteries, and creative use of powers. However, unsurprisingly, the art style drew deep concern among critics in regards to its portrayal of the female body, for promoting a, quote, biologically impossible body image to young girls. But of course, that is not the only issue of World of Winx. Oddly, none of the available official criticism from proper industry critics bring this up, but the fandom has long identified the issue of whitewashing in later Winx art styles. It's baffling and appalling that a franchise which made such a careful, deliberate decision to diversify its characters in 2004 just completely let go of this objective 10 years later. Magazine covers in this art style show a mystifying range in skin tone and even general appearance for Flora and Layla, and it is truly difficult to account for how 1 month apart a character can look so different and so far removed from their previously established ethnic background. When done well, the girls can look great in this art style, but things like this have real-world impact and cannot be swept away as a mere oversight due to color palette or experimentation. Today, the Fairy Couture art style has been largely retired. Fairy Couture as a brand, as short-lived as it was, represents an interesting experiment and an understanding of the wide appeal of Winx. I think many adult fans today would appreciate functional, wearable, usable Winx merch that is subtler in its branding and more intricate than a simple logo or picture slapped onto a t-shirt. Without World of Winx entering the picture, it would have been interesting to see where Fairy Couture might have developed, if at all. I genuinely think that the initial intention of Very Couture was to disguise the Winx in these products, and yet continue to capitalize on the Winx brand identity. But because of the Netflix deal, and the choice to use this art style in WoW, it became important to reintegrate the art style back into the brand, and reaffirm loudly that this is Winx. In that process, the problems of the art style were inherited by the rest of the brand. At the start of Very Couture as a fashion brand, likely a completely different team, most likely designers who were contracted from outside the company, worked on merchandising than those who created the show, and their priorities were evidently not in the same place. However, ultimately, the creatives behind the World of Winx show and the rest of the Winx franchise have accepted and appropriated the whitewashing of the art style, and it has been a problem within the franchise ever since. In all of this, there is an insidious sort of passivity, in the same way that Straffy knew that fans would be unhappy with the casting decisions for Fate the Winx saga, but seemingly did nothing to prevent it. But even passivity is too generous a word to describe this, because there are no mental acrobatics we can do to explain why the same issue appears in the Season 8 art style, and continued to do so until December of last year. As an early 2000s show, Winx seemed to make diversity a priority in its world. But the fact that 8 years later this started to disappear makes you question if the show's initial dedication to representation was genuine and serious, or if it was actually just a feature that was incidental. From the new art style of the comics to the 3D models of the upcoming reboot, we can see that the ethnic diversity of the girls has once again been brought to the forefront, down to their accents even. I think it's fair to say that this has caused hope and excitement, but I also think that no one would be blamed if they feel it was too little too late, and turned away from the franchise as a result of the whitewashing that is now a part of the legacy of the brand. This issue causes genuine hurt, and can cause real-world harm, and it certainly undermines goodwill and tarnishes the reputation of Winx Club amongst its fans. And it all seems to have started with Very Couture. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject. Initially, I wanted this video to be just about analysing the Very Couture fashion brand and associated merch pre-2016, because I just like talking about Winx merch, but it felt deceptive to not talk about the art style in general and its legacy within the brand. So if you need to get anything off your chest on the subject, I hope you feel like you can do that here. And let me know if you knew about Very Couture's origins as a brand, if you remember the merch, and what you thought of it when it was first coming out. Once again, I would like to stress a very significant portion of images of Very Couture products that we have access to only exist thanks to the archival efforts of Winx Club All, whose details will be linked in the description. And I think that's it. Until next time, bye!